The Indo-Pacific is home to rising tensions, territorial disputes, and a fierce battle for supremacy. In one corner is China, a country seeking to become a global superpower by aggressively expanding its influence across the Indo-Pacific and beyond. With its military buildup, sprawling claims over the South China Sea, and an unwavering ambition to bring Taiwan under its control, it's clear that China wants to rewrite the rules of the game, challenging any who dare stand in its way. But unfortunately for China, the country that's increasingly standing in its way is an actual superpower that no other country can challenge easily: the United States. Now, the US might not have the same geographic advantage, military infrastructure and presence, support and access as China does in the region, but what the US does have is a technological edge and unmatched naval innovation that can project power across vast distances with unparalleled precision and lethality. And at the heart of this innovative arsenal, USS Lewis B, an extraordinary vessel that could single-handedly decide the naval war between the US and China. And that's why China, with all its might and ambition, is terrified of this ship. But what makes USS Lewis B such a game-changer in the Indo-Pacific, and which problems was it made to address? Keep watching to find out. Though the US had already had a presence in the Indo-Pacific, World War II marked a pivotal shift in its strategic approach to the region. To continue its major military campaigns against Japan in the Pacific theater, the US built an airstrip on Canton Island, now part of the island of Kiribati, some 1,900 miles south of Hawaii. As a key refueling and staging hub for trans-Pacific flights, the airfield was essential in preventing the Allied nations in the Pacific from being encircled or isolated by enemy forces. But then World War II ended and the US gradually shifted its focus away from the Pacific Islands, redirecting its attention to Europe and other global priorities during the Cold War. This pivot led to a period of strategic neglect in the region, as US foreign policy concentrated on different fronts. Over the decades, this lack of sustained attention created a vacuum that China has been eager to exploit, advancing its influence through investments, political maneuvering, and strategic partnerships. The perfect example of this: the US-built airstrip in Kiribati we just mentioned. Some 8 decades after its construction, China is the one that wants to take control of it and restore it to full functionality. Though the Kiribati government claims that this 6,562-foot airstrip will be solely used for civilian purposes to improve transport links and bolster tourism, its relative proximity to Hawaii makes it a potential asset for military intelligence operations. The situation in Kiribati underscores the broader challenges the US faces in the Indo-Pacific. Its historical influence is being increasingly contested by China's assertive expansion. Should this expansion persist unabated, China could very well undermine regional security and bring the People's Liberation Army closer to US territory than ever. With this in mind, let's discuss the main challenges China poses in the region to understand how USS Lewis B fits into the strategic response. The number one issue the US faces in the Indo-Pacific is China's growing military presence in the Pacific Islands, including Kiribati and the Solomon Islands. Beijing is entering into security pacts with these nations, allowing it to deploy Chinese military personnel and police on their territories. But why does this matter? Well, it's simple. If China's troops and police are present in a strategic location, the US will likely lose its access to it and all the critical infrastructure it houses. Besides swaying nations in the Indo-Pacific to join its side physically, China has also done so diplomatically. You see, Beijing has successfully convinced a number of nations in the region, including Nauru and Solomon Islands, to shift diplomatic recognition from Taiwan to China. The goal? To further isolate Taiwan and undermine the US support for the island. The end goal? To completely erode the US diplomatic standing and stability in the Pacific Islands and bring Taiwan under Chinese control. China is pursuing this goal through economic and infrastructure investments too, trying to strengthen its foothold in the Indo-Pacific. That's why it's launched a number of projects in the region, including Tonga's water supply projects and port infrastructure in Fiji, each of them strategically positioned to secure influence, facilitate military access, and of course, challenge US dominance. With how aggressively China is pursuing its goals in the region and beyond, seeking to reshape the international order, a direct conflict between China and the US can't be ruled out. In fact, the escalating tensions and strategic competition are almost making such a clash inevitable. Now, you might think that China wouldn't stand a chance if this conflict were to erupt. After all, the US boasts unmatched military capabilities, economic strength, and global alliances. How could China possibly compete? Unfortunately, things aren't as simple as that. In the very region where this conflict would take place, the Indo-Pacific, almost everything is working against the US, making the logistics of a potential conflict nothing short of a nightmare. How so? Well, let's see. What do you need for a successful conflict in terms of logistics? First and foremost, you need a network of highly connected military bases. Take the Cold War as an example. The US was anticipating a confrontation with its number one enemy, the Soviet Union, so it established a vast network of highway-connected military bases stretching from Italy to Germany. These bases served as the logistical backbone of the US's military operations in the northern European plains, which were considered the primary theater at the time. But the northern European plains spans an area roughly half the size of the contiguous US, which occupies about 3 million square miles. The Pacific Ocean, on the other hand, covers roughly 60 million square miles. That's almost 1/3 of the Earth's total surface. So even though the US military has bases in the Pacific, this region is so vast that the bases are too far apart from each other and from potential conflict hotspots. Out of the roughly 400 military bases the US controls in the Pacific, the closest to major conflict areas are those located in countries like Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines. Japan alone houses 120 active bases, making it the country with the highest number of US bases in the world, followed by Germany with 119 and South Korea with 73. About 70% of the bases in Japan are in and around Okinawa, a strategically vital region due to its proximity to potential flashpoints like Taiwan and the Korean Peninsula. Though all of these bases occupy approximately 77,000 acres of Japan, it's important to note that not all of them are full-fledged military installations. Some of these bases are nothing but single antenna sites. The second closest military bases to potential flashpoints in the Indo-Pacific are the bases on the US islands like Hawaii and Guam. But their distance from potential conflict areas isn't the only problem. Once the US started recasting the posture of its military forces to address rising threats in the region, Guam was in a severely run-down state. The island's infrastructure, roads, the water supply, the electrical system, piers, the airfield runways, virtually everything was in dire need of repair and modernization. Though the US has since heavily invested in Guam, with infrastructure alone receiving $152 million, the extensive scope of repairs and upgrades means that progress is still slow. Of course, the most advanced and well-equipped US military bases in the Pacific follow the designs of those on the US mainland, such as ones in California and Washington. These bases benefit from state-of-the-art infrastructure, extensive support systems, and direct access to advanced technology and logistics networks. However, while these mainland bases offer superior capabilities and readiness, their distance from the Indo-Pacific theater means they play a more indirect role in immediate regional operations. So basically, there's a Pacific military bases trilemma. The trilemma involves balancing three critical factors: capability, proximity, and infrastructure. Bases in Japan and South Korea are closest to potential conflict zones and can respond rapidly, but they face issues of resource constraints and local opposition. Mainland US bases offer superior infrastructure and technology, but are thousands of miles away from the Indo-Pacific flashpoints of the East China Sea, Korean Peninsula, South China Sea, and Taiwan. Remote bases, such as those in Guam, have strategic importance but struggle with outdated facilities, complicating their effectiveness. From this alone, you can probably understand why the so-called tyranny of distance has been labeled as one of the, if not the, most significant challenges in US military strategy in the Pacific. The maths is simple. The further the military force needs to be projected, the more complex and resource-intensive the operation becomes, especially when distance isn't a challenge for your opponent. But as we previously mentioned, China doesn't only have geography on its side. It also has numerous regional alliances, another logistical prerequisite for warfare, which enhances its strategic positioning while complicating the US's strategic calculus. That's why the US Coast Guard cutter USCGC Oliver Henry was prevented from refueling in the Solomon Islands in August 2022, and why the USCGC Juniper wasn't cleared to dock at Vanuatu port for the same purpose in January 2023. The governments of these countries can label these incidents as bureaucratic mishaps all they want, but the timing and nature of these refusals only confirms one thing: China's influence reaches deep into the Pacific. As a result, even some of the US partners in South and Southeast Asia are avoiding outright aligning with the US against China. Other vital elements of warfare logistics are also on China's side: effective supply chains, numerous command and control centers, complex transportation networks, regular upkeep and repair of military equipment. You name it, China's got it covered. The US, on the other hand, is mostly left to its own devices in the region, even with all the crucial strategic alliances in the Indo-Pacific. After all, the US is usually the one to bear the brunt of all the defense responsibilities within these alliances, so if the US wanted to maintain operational readiness in the region, it had to do it on its own. However, traditional logistics solutions such as sea lift simply aren't viable in this scenario. Not when there's the threat of enemy ballistic missiles, China's expanding influence casting a long shadow in the region, and of course, the tyranny of distance. That's why the US came up with Expeditionary Sea Bases, or ESBs for short. Simply put, ESBs are floating military bases, but don't confuse these with traditional warships designed for combat. ESBs are mobile platforms designed to support a wide range of military operations, with an emphasis on logistics, all while staying out of direct combat zones. These bases will allow the US to project power and sustain operations in contested areas without relying on vulnerable land bases or traditional supply chains. So you've got your aircraft carriers that act like an airbase at sea. There are also amphibious vessels resembling mobile ports. And then you have the ESBs, which can be best compared to a flight-decked garage at sea, a $650 million floating garage. As such, ESB vessels are primarily designed to support low-intensity missions, allowing the US Navy to retask the more high-value surface combatant warships and amphibious warships to more demanding operational missions. But don't confuse low intensity with low importance. While ESBs aren't built for frontline combat, their role is critical in sustaining long-term operations. Supporting missions such as mine clearance, special operations, drone launches, refueling and maintenance, they practically allow high-intensity tasks to take place. As you can probably guess by now, the USS Lewis B Puller is one of these game-changing vessels. So let's learn everything about it. USS Lewis B Puller is the first purpose-built ESB vessel to be constructed for the US Navy, as well as the second ship to be named in honor of Lieutenant General Lewis Chesty Puller. Lieutenant General Puller is one of the most decorated Marines in American history, having been awarded 5 Navy Crosses and 1 Distinguished Service Cross during his 37 years of service. He was awarded his 5th Navy Cross for the Battle of Chosin Reservoir in 1950 during the Korean War, with the award citation highlighting his unflagging determination that allowed him to ensure the correct tactical employment of the troops, keep open the main supply routes, supervise prompt evacuation of all casualties, and assure the safety of much valuable equipment which would otherwise have been lost to the enemy. Interestingly, the second US Navy vessel to be named after him, USS Lewis B Puller, shares the legacy of resilience and operational flexibility that Lieutenant General Puller embodied. USS Lewis B Puller was first ordered in February 2012, delivered in June 2015, and commissioned in August 2017 at Khalifa bin Salman Port in Al Hid, Bahrain, becoming the first US-built ship to be commissioned outside the US. Prior to this, the ship's prefix changed from USNS, United States Naval Ship, to USS, United States Ship. The reason for this change lies in the law of armed conflict, which mandates that ships in active combat operations must be designated as USS to reflect their combat-ready status. The ship's hull classification also changed from TESB-3 to ESB-3 to indicate it will be manned by US Navy sailors rather than civilian mariners. Since USS Lewis B Puller was the first purpose-built ESB vessel, it shouldn't be surprising it's also the lead ship in the US Navy's ESB vessel class. This class consists of 5 other vessels: USS Herschel Woody Williams, USS Miguel Keith, USS John L. Canley, USS Robert E. Simonak, USS Hector A. Cafferata Jr. The Canley was last out of the first 3 ships to deploy in February 2024, while the last 2 vessels on the list are still under construction. When the leader among these ships, USS Puller, was being commissioned, the former commander of Naval Forces Central Command, Vice Admiral Kevin M. Donegan, described it as a revolutionary concept. His words were, "The Puller isn't just another ship, but a revolutionary concept, a ship that provides us a key platform that will provide continuity to a variety of operations." So let's see what this platform looks like and which operations it supports. There's no doubt about it, USS Lewis B Puller is unique in every sense of the word. The same goes for its silhouette, which stands out with its distinctive flat-bottomed hull and expansive flight deck, which makes it resemble a floating parking lot. The initial design was based on the hull of the civilian Alaska-class oil tanker, which allowed the US Navy to keep the costs relatively low compared to other fully improvised vessels. For comparison's sake, a San Antonio-class ship, designed for amphibious warfare, costs roughly $2 billion, while an ESB like the Puller can be built for around $650 million. Basically, General Dynamics National Steel and Shipbuilding Company created the Puller by removing the middle section from an off-the-shelf Alaska-class tanker and adding a flight deck. But the spacious flight deck is just one of the Puller's main capabilities. It also has aviation facilities, command and control assets, a mission deck, an ample crew and supplies room. An overview of all these capabilities makes it abundantly clear why China is terrified of this vessel. Let's start with the USS Lewis B Puller's most prominent feature, the massive flight deck. Now, just how massive are we talking? It's approximately the size of a football field, making the Puller's desk the third largest in the US Navy inventory, behind only the actual aircraft carriers and amphibious assault ships, whose decks typically span more than 3 football fields. This deck, which makes up for almost half of the 764-foot-long ship, is large enough to land transport aircraft, such as the MV-22 Osprey, the primary assault support aircraft for the US Marine Corps, and the CH-53 Super Stallion, the Marine Corps' primary heavy-lift helicopter. In total, there's enough room for 4 CH-53s and 2 MH-53s to land simultaneously, which significantly enhances the Puller's operational flexibility and capability in supporting various missions. The former aircraft would use the 4 rotary wing landing spots, while the latter 2 can be accommodated in additional deck space. A variety of other helicopters can also use USS Lewis B Puller's expansive deck, from the smaller Bell AH-1 Cobra single-engine attack helicopter to the larger Boeing CH-47 heavy-lift helicopter. The only aircraft you'll never see on an ESB like the Puller is the F-35B STOVL fighter, as the heat from its exhaust could damage the deck. But helicopters aren't the only military assets you'll find on the Puller. This extraordinary ship also facilitates the launch, operation, and recovery of various unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs for short. The Boeing In Situ Scan-Eagle surveillance and reconnaissance aerial vehicle and the Aerosonde UAS drone with multiple mission capability are just some examples. These UAVs extend the Puller's operational reach by providing real-time intelligence and surveillance, as well as supporting reconnaissance missions and enhancing situational awareness. Best of all, thanks to the spacious flight deck, entire swarms of these drones can be launched and recovered simultaneously, transforming the Puller into a mobile command center that can project power and precision across vast expanses of the Indo-Pacific. Speaking of command centers, USS Lewis B Puller boasts rather impressive command and control capabilities. With over 2 megawatts of surplus energy, up to 40 desks, and plenty of space for information fusion, it can serve as a hub for coordinating complex operations and integrating real-time data from multiple sources. Besides storing and processing massive amounts of data, this ship has the necessary capabilities to keep this data private, which is essential for maintaining operational security and ensuring that sensitive information remains secure from potential adversaries. These capabilities become even more crucial when the adversary in question is China, a country known for its sophisticated cyber capabilities. The next feature of USS Lewis B Puller that deserves attention is its advanced aviation facilities. Besides the helicopter landing deck we mentioned previously, this ship also features a hangar, which provides ample space for storing and maintaining aircraft. The hangar's design supports a variety of aviation assets, ensuring they are kept in optimal condition and ready for rapid deployment. Given how many times we've used words like massive and spacious to describe this ship, it shouldn't be surprising that USS Lewis B Puller also offers ample crew and supplies room, the final crucial feature of the ship. As far as the crew goes, this ship can support up to 298 mission-related personnel, including special operations teams. A typical ESB crew consists of 44 military Sea-Lift Command personnel and 101 military support staff, leaving plenty of space for specialized roles and operational needs. The military crew on this ship operates on a rotational model, with the blue and the gold crew alternating on and off the hull every 5 months. These color designations were originally introduced for the US Navy's fleet of submarines during the Cold War, but are now used across various naval platforms. The goal of this crew rotation system is simple: to allow the ship to always stay deployed and operate in hazardous areas for longer periods. As for the supplies, they can be stored both above and under the deck. The former capabilities allow mission-related equipment to be stored on deck, including up to 4 Mk105 minesweeping hydrofoil sleds. The latter refers to approximately 82,000 square feet of mission deck space below, including an ordnance storage magazine, underway replenishment facilities, and a spacious area for the installation of containerized mission equipment and handling of rigid hull boats, which can also be launched from the Puller. Here's a quick rundown of a few more facts you should know about the USS Lewis B Puller before moving on to how this ship performs in action. The maximum speed of the Puller is 15 knots, while its operational range is 9,500 nautical miles. Fully loaded, this ship displaces approximately 90,000 long tons, which provides it with the substantial mass and stability needed for sustained operations in diverse maritime environments. The Puller can even be armed, thanks to 12 stations reserved for mounting 50 caliber machine guns. With all the mind-blowing specs out of the way, let's see how this unique combination of capabilities translates into real-world performance and effectiveness. After being commissioned in August 2017, USS Lewis B Puller has been part of a number of important operations around the Arabian Sea. At first, this ship was only involved in military exercises, the Alligator Dagger in 2017, the deployment of a detachment from Helicopter Mine Countermeasure Squadron 15 for training in 2018, and deck landing qualifications for US Army AH-64 Apache attack helicopters in 2020. 2022 was when the first notable operational deployment of USS Lewis B Puller took place. In December of that year, the crew on board the Puller interdicted and boarded the stateless fishing trawler in the Gulf of Oman, seizing 7,000 proximity fuses for rockets, over 4,600 pounds of propellants for launching rocket-propelled grenades, and ammunition rounds, including over 1 million AK-47 rounds. The 50 tons of weapons and ammunition were reportedly being smuggled to the Houthis in Yemen by Iran, but the latter was eventually used as military aid for Ukraine after the seizure. Once the Houthis started attacking commercial shipping vessels in the Red Sea in November 2023, the Puller was deployed to the Arabian Sea to help support maritime operations in the region. In January 2024, the ship served as the launch pad for the Navy SEAL mission that seized Iranian-made ballistic missile and cruise missile components reportedly sent to the Houthi rebels. The Navy SEALs launched from the Puller in a small boat, conducting a mission known as Visit Board Search and Seizure, and that's exactly what they did. They approached it traveling off the coast of Somalia, boarded it, detained its crew, and searched all the holds for weapons and seized them. As of September 2024, USS Lewis B Puller is still located in the same area, the Persian Gulf, waiting for its next assignment. Let's say that the assignment in question involves standing up to China. How could USS Lewis B Puller help the US best this rival in the Indo-Pacific? From the very beginning, this ship was designed with the logistics of a conflict in the Pacific Ocean in mind. As Vice Admiral Donegan put it, this expeditionary sea base allows the Navy and Marine Corps team to meet the threats in the region head-on. And since these threats are asymmetric, growing, and ever-evolving, the Puller was also designed to be more diverse and capable than previous warships around the globe. So this ship can be outfitted with support facilities for a range of operations, including special forces missions, counter-piracy operations, maritime security operations, mine clearance, and humanitarian aid and disaster relief missions. Of course, these missions are just extras to the ones the Puller can perform with its native capabilities, such as intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and command and control operations. Thanks to the modular command and control capabilities, the Puller is also a valuable asset for maintaining situational awareness and relaying information. In the context of a conflict with China, virtually all military assets, intelligence, and complex operations across the Indo-Pacific could be successfully coordinated in real time from this vessel alone. USS Lewis B Puller could also be used for medevac and reinforcement, which makes it an essential platform for sustaining operations and ensuring rapid response capabilities. However, due to the tyranny of distance, one role in particular would be a game changer in a conflict between the US and China: the Puller's role as a logistical node. According to some estimates, ESBs like the Puller have the capacity to store over 11 million gallons of cargo, which can be either distributed to troops ashore or used to refuel various sea-based platforms at sea. To understand just how massive this capacity is, all you need to know is that amphibious assault ships like USS America can only carry 1 million gallons of cargo fuel. Even Nimitz-class aircraft carriers, which are basically huge cities at sea, can only carry about 3.5 million gallons of fuel. Technically, this means that a single ESB like the Puller could refuel an entire fleet of aircraft carriers or a large number of destroyers, providing unprecedented logistical support in extended naval operations. But let's say the Puller isn't only carrying cargo fuel. The vast cargo space would allow this ship to transport essential resources to US troops in the Indo-Pacific, preventing China from ever cutting off their supply lines. The best part? These supplies wouldn't just be stored on the Puller. They could also be directly transported to ground troops with one of the many helicopters the Puller can accommodate. This is undoubtedly groundbreaking, as the Pacific Ocean is simply too vast and contains insufficient US-held land infrastructure for any other form of logistics to be effective or resilient. If the troops were to use land ports or airports, China could easily target and bomb these strategic points, disrupting the supply lines. But the same can't be done with helicopters. These aircraft excel at delivering supplies without the need for extensive infrastructure. Spare parts, fuel, ammunition, food, water, whatever US troops needed, the Puller could swiftly deliver via helicopters, ensuring uninterrupted operational capability and reinforcing the US presence across the region. Water is of particular importance, as recent exercises in the Philippines showed that an average Marine uses 20 gallons of water per day for hydration, hygiene, and other essential needs. Thanks to the Puller's onboard desalination systems, the ship could carry enough water to sustain hundreds of troops for extended periods, making it a vital lifeline in remote or contested areas. Essentially, USS Lewis B puller could resolve virtually all logistical challenges the US would face in a potential war with China in the Indo-Pacific. No nearby military bases? No problem. The puller can bring critical supplies directly to troops in the field via its extensive helicopter facilities. Forbidden access to ports for refueling? It's all good. The puller's enormous cargo capacity allows it to refuel sea-based platforms at sea, ensuring that critical naval assets remain operational even if they can't dock at traditional refueling stations. Remote or contested areas? Not an issue. The puller's ability to operate and deliver supplies from its floating base ensures support even in the most isolated locations. Threats to land infrastructure? Easily circumvented. The puller's mobility and self-sufficiency mean it can maintain operational continuity while bypassing vulnerable land-based supply routes. Simply put, the puller is a versatile logistical powerhouse capable of bridging gaps, sustaining forces, and maintaining US operational readiness in the face of any challenge posed by the vast and complex theater of the Indo-Pacific. That's why China fears it so much. But what do you think? Could China possibly find a way to neutralize or counteract the puller's significant advantages? Or will the extraordinary US Navy lead the US to victory in any scenario? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Now go and check out Japan Shocks China by Revealing 5 Never-Before-Seen Weapons, or click this other video instead.